In your place, in your place, in your place, in your place, in your place. Hey.
Alright, what's up guys? This is Alex Rose. Maybe my cam will not be all blurry today. No, maybe, who knows? Alright, got a cool video for you today. We're going to be doing another track breakdown, this time of my latest track, In Your Place, my remix of Crescent's In Your Place. This track's almost at 2 million plays on YouTube. That's insane. I definitely recommend you go check it out, and check out my version as well, my remix. The link is in the description, and you can stream it wherever you prefer. Just follow that link and it will go to Apple Music or whatever. A bunch of people are asking, you know, because I'm a Spotify guy, so, you know, where do I find it on whatever platform? Just follow that link. It's got all of them through that platform. It's pretty cool. But let's stop dilly-daddling and let's get in the reason you're all here, the breakdown of my new G-House track, so that you can maybe learn something about how to make your own G-House tracks. Wouldn't that be crazy? Alrighty, so we're here in FL, and this is a special breakdown because, like I said, it's a remix. So we've got an original track to work with, and this actually made it quite challenging because I know I wanted to remix a song, and I asked H if I could after you know, I first heard it in like May or maybe it was even earlier than that, maybe April or something. Anyways, when I first heard it, I really liked it. It was kind of a new direction for him to be going in, and I wanted to remix it. However, it is at like 83 BPM, which, as you know, means I either have to slow it down from 166 down to 128 or something like that, or I tried one version where I did it at 132, slowed down from 166. Or I can speed it up from 83 up to like 120, which is what I ended up doing. So it's a slower house track, but it's still in time. So I'm gonna play for you the original bell that I ended up using in the final version of the track. All I used from the original was this bell, and I think I used like one snare sample or something from the original, and the vocal obviously. So here's the original bell ARP that I used. So that ARP, by the way, this was all produced by 40K, amazing hip-hop producer. He does all of Crescent stuff. So the first thing I did, we'll just hone in on it here, it's this sample here, so this bell. So I slowed it down, or did I speed it up? I think I sped it up. And I also did some pitch shifting because I didn't want it to be in a new key. So let's listen to this alone. Yeah, so I definitely sped it up, and it's got, you know, that pumping kind of energy sound, and it's lower than the original one. And let's see where it's routed to. So we actually have a CLA vocals. I like putting CLA vocals on things that aren't vocals just because it has, you know, a good compressor, lots of different effects, so it's kind of an easy way to bust all your effects into one. So as you see, I looked for a body double because has a very interesting effect, and it sounds cool on synths as well as on actual vocals. And so let's listen to it without it. So it makes it really wide because of the doubling effect, and it just makes it fill up a lot more space and sound a lot cooler. Then we just have a standard low cut to make sure it's not interfering with the bass or the kick of the song, and some light side chaining with kickstart. So that's without the kickstart. Which gives it that kind of pulsing sound that we want in house music. Next we'll move on to the vocal, because that's the other part that was lifted from the original. So the vocal, for the most part, I sped up, except for, so I sped it up for the In Your Place part.
In your place.
And then I slowed it down from 180 by duplicating it. So see, I have vocals 1 and vocals 2, which I slowed down.
This is good music.
So originally, if I sped it up, it would have sounded like, this is good music. But instead, I think it sounds better when it's slowed down like that. So I had to make those choices with what I wanted to do with the vocal. I didn't use a lot of different lyrics. I only really used the "in your place" and "this is good music." I tried to maybe fit in, "I put you in the place, I'm a realtor," because I like that line a lot, but it just didn't fit with the way the song was going. And it was actually one of the last things I did was insert the vocal. So I basically built the song around the bell. And here, we'll just kick out this bell because we don't need it anymore. But I built the song around the bell and then kind of inserted the vocal afterwards, which is typical for a G House song. The other thing I did was I added in these like and stuff. This is something that I got inspired from Lodge 21 that they do a lot. I don't think I did it perfectly. I could have been more thoughtful about the placement of where they went in terms of filling space, making sure they actually pop out. I kind of just did them at a certain frequency and copy pasted the pattern, but they sound like this. Let's go back and look at the vocal processing on the crescent vocals. So they're CLA and parametric EQ. So here's what they sound like.
In your place, in your place, in your place.
So without CLA.
In your place, in your place, in your place.
So the thing about hip hop and remixing it and mixing it for EDM is that hip hop's actually usually mastered really, really quietly, and so you need to really compress things a lot to match EDM standards, I guess. So again, body double fills it up, makes it really big. The leads and the bass are in the middle and taking the forefront of this genre. So I wanted to make sure that that ARP and the vocals are filling up the rest of the space.
In your place, in your place, in your place, in your place, in your place.
And then the EQ again is just a low cut, really simple low cut. For effects, very simple. Just pulled a bunch of Cashmere samples and other Evolution of Sound samples, as well as this Blau downlifter I like a lot. And there's really only gain staging done on these to make sure they're not too loud, because especially the Cashmere ones can be super loud. The other thing that I did was I took one of the vocals, I think it's just when he's saying place, and I flipped it around to make a this kind of suck-in effect here. And that's a technique I learned a while ago. It's very useful. How you do it is you just go into Edison, record with a lot of reverb and stuff, like the last word of a vocal, and then you reverse it when you have it in the playlist, and you can create a uplifter like that. So if we look at the processing, it's on 16. Yeah, so there's no processing on the actual thing because it was all done and then exported into the playlist. And it makes this cool sucking kind of effect. I think the first time I heard it was in Kaztek's Get Funky. Is that what it's called? Came to Get Funky, something like that. And that's what I based it off of. I really like that sound, and I tried to use it throughout the song. We'll talk about it during the drop, but yeah. So this is very simple. Very simple effects, nothing crazy to talk about there. Let's go over the drums. So Evolution of Sounds, mostly for the drop and stuff. Fairly simple, just from the Confessions pack, I think. And so I have some snares and additive claps fully panned so that they hit on sides and are noticeable, even though they're pretty quiet. And then all the processing is done on this drum bus. And the drum bus has a lot of stuff going on. So let's listen to with nothing on. So it's super weak, really it wouldn't punch through the mix at all. So there's saturation going on from a saturation knob, which is an awesome free plugin. Not super noticeable alone. Add a big reverb. And now something important, signal flow. We have that reverb going into sausage fattener so that it also gets compressed and saturated along with the rest of the signal. The reason that I do that is if I'm struggling to find a reverb that strikes the right balance between being loud enough or being prominent enough without drowning out the effect and the transient of the main synth. So I'll put the compression afterwards. And that really brings it out. It brings out the tail of the reverb as well. And then finally in EQ, just to cut out the lows, boost the mid kind of highs a bit, and take down the high highs. So that's all the drum programming for there. There's also drum programming for this kind of break section, so we'll go into that. So this is kind of going into some like hip hop trap stuff. So there again, lots of panning to kind of create this soundscape using the entire stereo spectrum, not just the frequency spectrum. And I really wanted to use this kind of fuzzy top trap kick that didn't have a great transient because there's the 808 going on and whatnot, and I really wanted to evoke that trap sound from the original version of the song. Okay, great. Now let's move on. So the meat of the track, we'll start with this intro sub. This is something I took inspiration from Oliver Heldens. He does this a lot at the beginning of his tracks, and I really like it, having this kind of sub playing around, doing like a simpler version of the melody that you find in the drop. So in this section, what you hear is it's actually high pass for the first half a tiny bit, and then it's in full effect. And kind of the intention with doing this is people will think, oh, okay, this song is like, it's coming in and sounds all right, and then boom, the sub of this intro sub hits them, and they're like, oh, okay, I see, this is serious, this is a loud song, and they're ready to go. So let's look at the sound design. I believe it's the fat sub from Confessions Revolutions 2. Yes, it is. Okay. Let's ride to 15. That's here. So just a kickstart and that fruity, that low cut that we talked about. And the kickstart is just a regular one. It's not the sub one that we would use for a legit sub. This is more like an 808 that we're using. We're treating it as an 808 anyways. And again, that from that Kaztech song, I like that swoopy in sound. It's what I use in Drank as well, which is this patch that you guys have seen quite a lot, Baus House. I just set it really far to the right. Normally it's set kind of over here, and that makes the more like Jaws sound. But when you put it into the middle, it will sound like it's more sweeping in. Let's listen to that alone. Really, really, really cool sound. I love it, and I use it in almost all of my songs. I use it in different variations just by changing this LFO. I'm thinking of actually making some of these sounds that I've designed available to my Patreon supporters. So in addition to the mashups and stuff that I offer at the $5 level, I think I'm gonna also just start putting in these presets that I use a lot, and I usually tweak them. I don't use the original version that I have saved, but I have like this one, the Mallow one, my Mallow Pluck, and as well as a bunch of like prophecy ones that I've made. They're all, you can really make them if you just YouTube it yourself, but if you want to, you know, support the channel, get past, you know, the 20 minutes or whatever it takes to watch one of those tutorials, then you can head over to my Patreon and it's all on there. But yeah, in terms of the melody, it's really just taken from the drop and simplified. It's it doesn't go too crazy, just stays within, you know, the couple notes to be like an introduction basically, which it's meant to be. So the other thing I did is I didn't only use the bell that you hear. I thought it couldn't really fill up a break on its own, so I added in this other pluck. So let's take a look at that. So it's actually two plucks on top of each other. Here's the first one. So here's the original version of this pluck. It's Pad's pluck. And what I liked about it is that if you played it in the upper octave, it was a pluck, and then in a lower octave, it became this pad. And I liked the amount of delay as well, that kind of ping pong delay, because it sounds similar to the original ARP. But yeah, I just drowned it in reverb and low cut. And then the other one sounds like this. So that one's more for the transits, because, you know, I wanted a click on it to really have the attack hit well. And together, under a lot of reverb, they sound really good. So here's without, like, the processing. Sounds alright, but it really adds to the atmosphere when you do add in that processing. In terms of arrangement, the intro, again using this kind of soup in. So I always time the that bounce house to kind of suck in to the next kick. And so I think if you look at its routing, it's on 28. Yeah, it actually doesn't have, oh no, it's not on 28, that's the wrong one. If you, where is it? Intro sub. It's on 22. I think there's no sidechain on it. Oh, no, there is. Okay. There is sidechain on it, but it's placed earlier so that you hear the beginning of it kind of sucking into the kick, and then you hear the kick as the second half. It's just the MIDI has to be placed that way so that it aligns with the LFO. And then the other one is being processed on 15, just a kickstart and a low cut. And on the bus for all of the basses that you'll hear later is a kickstart, a sausage fattener, and a low cut to make room for the sub, which is, you know, very, very standard. The other thing too I want to note is that I made kind of a shorter intro than usual. I'd normally make longer than 8 bars. I'd normally make like 16, 32 bars. But I wanted this to really be short so that I didn't have to make like a separate radio edit and then extended edit. You can play this out in the club and you'll have plenty of room for transitioning. So here's the structure for that verse before the drop. Okay, so let's talk about some of this. So there's no snare build, there's not much in terms of percussion. It's really short, it's only, again, 8 bars. I wanted this track to move quickly in terms of the arrangement so that you could get to the drop as soon as possible. So I really wanted it to be versatile, wanted it to be accessible, easy for DJs to play in their sets because they still have an intro, gets to the drop quickly. It's exciting for the listener. They're not waiting forever. It doesn't feel like a normal house track where you're waiting. You're going to fast forward a minute and a half into the track just to hear the drop. The other thing I chose to do, again, no snare builds because I wanted the focus to be on the vocal and on the plucks, and then give this room and space, let the decay and reverb go on. This amount of space really builds the tension for when the drop hits, and then here's the drop.
In your place. In your place.
Hey.
Alright, so let's talk about the drop. We've already talked about the drums. Let's go into the synth. So drop number 2 is the first one we're going to look at. So I struggled a lot with processing the main Mala bass, which is this, one I use in a lot of songs, including Drank. For some reason, I just didn't like the way that it was sounding normally. The amount of compression or whatever, here's what it sounds like. To me, it just sounded super, super weak. So I put more processing on it. Like a lot of saturation, and then additional Maximus compression. And to me, it might sound oversaturated in context of the rest of the song. That's something, not sure if I 100% like the outcome, but I think on its own, it actually has a really nice kind of brooding bass sound. Again, doing the Bauhaus kind of swoops in from that Kaztec song, I think really adds to it. Since it is slower at 120, I feel like that keeps the energy up by having it suck in like that. I'm not going to comment on the sub bass. It's just a standard sine wave at the lowest possible, and then it's the aggregate of all the other basses that are going on to make sure that it's kind of continuous. Really wanted to keep a rolling bass line so that there's just constant bass, sub bass throughout the drop between the kick and the sub bass going on there. So looking at this is something that was debated in the comments, which I have to say I really appreciate, guys. I love that you have a passion for the topic and that you want to talk about it. But people are mentioning these bass glides. It's from this Evolution of Sounds thing. Which is from the song Wow. And these, again, they're all routed into this bass bus. There's not a whole lot of individual processing going on them, mostly just saturation knobs and EQing, nothing special. But I originally had the Mala bass playing those notes, and it just sounded really empty to me, like there was something missing. To me, it sounds kind of like someone being off kilter, off feet. And I like that after, the hard hitting, the boom, 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 boom. It's like, oh wow, I'm kind of kicked off my feet, and I like that sound. So, and then the last thing is this fill. I probably had the biggest challenge with coming up with this fill. I didn't know if I wanted to do, more drum fills, or wanted to high pass the regular pattern and then do this, but I had a really hard time coming up with this thing. I made this pluck for a collaboration that I might be doing with Anthony Seam, who's pretty dope. It's just a modified version of a preset from a different Future Bounce pack that I just modified a bunch to make. So let's look at it. If it's on track 20, yeah, so there's like a saturation knob on it again. Just to gritty it up, and with the other processing, it will make it sound more aggressive. So in context, that's...
In your place. In your place. This is good music.
And so here's the other thing that people were commenting about was this other growl. So if I play it just in the pattern, it's pitch automated to go downwards in the actual song, but it's this kind of fuzzy bass, again from Evo Sounds, and just modified a little bit to how I like it. And it's on 18, no processing other than the bass bus. So pretty simple stuff. You don't need to do a lot of modifications if you've got a good patch. And the guys at Evo Sounds do really good stuff. Here's the down here the automation that's handling that. So I think I have it just set to 12. Yep, 12 semitones down. And then you just move this this little guy, tools, last tweaked, create automation clip, and then you can automate stuff like that. So the break, just some really simple low passing and then opening up of the filter as it goes on. And then here's the trap break. I haven't done a trap break in a song in a while, so I was pretty stoked to do it. And it meant that I had to invest in making an 808, which was dope. I used to make like future bass stuff like 2 years ago, and so it was a lot of fun to go back to that. Yeah, I made future bass with like 808s and huge saw stuff when I was first starting out, and I would do a bunch of remixes, and it was a lot of fun to go back to that. So this 808, I just made it myself, and it's just 2 sine waves with a bunch of effects on it, basically just hyper and distortion and stuff. Let's listen to it without any of this. And it's on 32. So very, very light distortion, basically just saturating it. And this limiter is just acting for the sidechain from the ghost kick. Do I have proper, where is it? Yeah, here it is. So I believe I have this doing the coarse pitch modulation, but I don't see it. Yeah, okay, here it is. So in the master tune, I have this very like tiny envelope, changing it to give it that that transit that you hear. So it sounds like a kick or tom, basically. And then if you listen to it in context with just this, where is it? Whoops. Listen to it with the ghost kick. This is because I don't like setting the regular kick as the sidechain to the limiter, because it will always sound fuzzy and it won't be as tight as it otherwise could be. So I always just put in MIDI from a 3x oscillator instead, and then set it how I like, put a big release so that the release is covering the rest of this kick waveform. It's just a much better, cleaner way of doing it, I find, than having you know, if it's sidechained to like the specific waveform, it will create weird distortion. So this sounds much better. And with everything, it sounds really good with the pluck and with the vocal here.
Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place.
Again, I wanted this song to be quick, so it doesn't spend any time lollygagging around. After the short trap break, goes straight into a build, this time with a snare build.
In your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. Put you in your place, in your place, in your place. In your place.
And it's the same as the first drop. And then the outro is very similar to the intro.
Music in your place. In your place.
This time that sub is just free reign. There's no low cut on it.
In your place. In your place.
And unlike the intro, you do get space without any bass. That's for outro mixing for the DJs.
In your place.
So I would say the biggest thing with this track is I did pump it out very, very quickly because I wanted the release to happen as soon as possible. And I felt very inspired to make it. I actually made 2 other versions previously, and I was like, fuck, I finally get what I want to do with this track. And I wanted to materialize that as soon as possible. I was still paying attention to detail with the little things like making that reverse vocal and certain things to do with the drop, which I was also struggling with. And so overall, I think I really like how the track came out, and I really like what the end result was. Were there things I could have improved? Yeah, I think the trap drum break in terms of percussion is much stronger than the drums for the drop. I now have access to some better samples. Not that the Evolution of Sound samples are bad or anything. I just don't think I use them to their best ability. And then the other thing I would really change about it is those like hey samples. Like, I don't think I did that super well. But that wraps it up for this week. I'm not going to include the mastering yet. Again, I might do a separate video on that because I have some other tracks coming out. But if you like the song and you like what you heard, definitely go stream it. Like I said, the link will be in the description. If you're a longtime visitor of mine, it helps a lot if you put it into like playlists for when you're in the car or whatever, just passively to stream it, or if you're at work or something like that. That helps a lot. And it helps Spotify know to suggest it to more people in their like radios and things like that. So if you want to help me there, again, if you also are interested in getting access to my mashups, I know some of them have been doing pretty well. The one that Oliver Heldens one from Ultra, the boom low one, was doing really well. If you want access to any of those, they're accessible through my Patreon, so you can go check out that. It's it's not necessary. You can always just listen to them on YouTube, but if you want a file to save for your own DJing because you don't want to have to recreate them in your DAW like I did, then there's always that option, and there's other stuff you can get there as well. So thanks for watching, and as always, happy dancing. So let's apply it to Martin Garrix because he's a very accessible example. Everyone knows who Martin Garrix is in this world.